Looking for a new career? Welcome to Do HVAC Training Service Center in North Charleston. Enroll today in our comprehensive HVAC training hands-on field experience-based program, covering troubleshooting, maintenance, installation, and more on various HVAC systems and ductwork. We offer EPA and NAEP preparation and testing, along with various certifications. Enjoy payment options. Achieve certification in under 5 months. Enroll now for your new journey of skill development and career advancement. Log on to dewhvactrainingsc.com to inquire.
So, Michelle.
So, David.
Just when you think spying can't get any more ridiculous.
I know, it did.
Balloons.
Balloon Gate.
Balloon Gate. Look, I have been wallowing, or shall I say floating, around on these balloons. And I'll be honest with you, we've had many listeners via our Twitter feed at iSpied Podcast.
At iSpied Podcast.
At iSpied Podcast. All going, you are going to talk about balloons. So,
well, because everyone else is.
Oh, hell. But what I find fascinating about this is everyone's like going, oh, this is ridiculous.
I know.
Stupid. No, it's not.
No.
This is really, really good fun.
Let's really tuck in then.
Let's pop this one.
Oh, God. You're listening to I Spied, the party balloon of Australian intelligence.
I love it. This is going to be so much.
My ears stop.
Oh. Yay.
Hello and welcome to I Spy. My name's Michelle Stevenson. I'm here with David Callan, and we are going to tackle the big issue, Balloon Gate.
Balloon Gate.
I mean, it's like everyone kind of got all into this for some reason, and it really actually took me by surprise. But if you haven't been paying attention, there was a balloon floating over the US, and everyone kind of had their opinion on it. They were demanding that it get shot down.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
And, of course, Joe Biden did authorise to shoot it down, but in a safe space, so it landed in the Atlantic.
Well, actually, he wanted it done straight away. And the Pentagon turned around and went, dude, we don't actually know what's up there. It's 3 busloads of payload. It was huge.
Yes, and there's been a lot of rhetoric around China, and then China, of course, being embarrassed by it, and then everyone's saying, well, this didn't happen in the previous administration, and then the Defense Department goes, well, actually, it happened 3 times when Trump was in. Trump was like, well, I didn't know anything about it. It's like, well, you didn't know much about anything.
Yeah.
So
you were kind of drug-addled on Adderall anyway.
Yeah, you were eating Maccas the whole time.
I was really disappointed because I wanted to either look like the sky whale that's always up in Canberra or a big G21.
I know.
Like his 21st birthday. Anyway, this is... What I found fascinating was the number of people that were like, oh, this is stupid and it makes no sense. Right. What's really important about this, and we're going to go back in history.
Yeah, I think we really need to break it down as well because people are very confused by it. I mean, the Chinese government said it was a weather balloon.
Oh, no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
No. I have a few sources in certain places that have gone, weren't that. All right. Now, let's get right back. Let's go back. Let's get in the time machine, go back in history.
Great. Love
to
it.
the French Revolution.
Okay. It's very, very claustrophobic in this time machine.
Yes, I know. Look, as soon as the door is open, you'll be on the plains of France.
Great.
Where the Montpellier brothers were creating hot air balloons. They were used during the French Revolution.
Right.
Why? They went up to 600 metres above the ground. Back in that time, that was a long way above the battlefield, all right? So the whole thing was... It's
like a drone, an old-fashioned drone.
Elevation. Right, so it puts you above your enemy and you can see what they were doing. Then the Americans used them in the Civil War. In fact, a scientist and inventor, Thaddeus Howe... Yes, I love that name. He approached Lincoln in 1861 and said, Mr. President, we need to use balloons. Right?
Just like that.
Just like that. It's actually, they have a recording. The first recording of a human being was Thaddeus Howe going, Mr. President, we need a balloon. Okay. Right? They had 7 balloons. None of them were shot down. They could reach 1,000 metres, like a kilometre. That's a long way up.
I think we've all done that experiment when we were in primary school. We had to send a weather balloon up.
Now, he used hydrogen.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the problem, they actually had a hydrogen generator that would create the hydrogen. Up goes the balloon. There's a problem with hydrogen. And
it explodes?
It does. It has a chance to explode. But they didn't lose one.
Hindenburg,
right?
anyone?
Yeah, well, talk about that. That's important. And they would communicate either with telegraph, so they'd have someone with a little keypad and a line going down from the balloon, or semaphore, so a guy with either, with flags, flashing signals, right? And they use that. They used them in every sort of combat situation they were in, right up to the end of the 19th century. Then World War I happened, and the Germans stepped in with dirigibles.
Okay.
Some of these Zeppelins that they were putting up above the battlefield were up to 700 feet long.
Yeah.
They were manned. They had balloonists manning them, little motors to drive them around, as you would expect with a dirigible. And they had machine gunners, and some of them can carry up to 2 tons of ordnance.
Wow.
So, right, this is an important thing. The problem they discovered was they used hydrogen as well. And hydrogen has this awkward quality of exploding near heat.
Yeah.
So basically the Allies, the British essentially, armed their guys with incendiary bullets and they just shot them down. Nice and simple.
Yeah.
Jump to World War II, right? Because the Americans realised this isn't really going to... In fact, what happened was during World War I, the Americans went, hang on, the hydrogen is not good. What's a better gas for this? And it's a little gas called helium.
Oh.
Yeah. So basically the Americans...
Makes you talk like this.
The Americans just got to get it. We've now got to go and kill everybody. Attack! So basically they discovered helium, and we'll talk about helium as well. It's really important we talk about it. They discovered helium, one of the noble gases, one of the most...
The noble gases?
It's a noble gas.
What do you mean a noble gas?
It's called that's the part of argon, neon, freon, helium, hydrogen. It's a gas. It's lighter than air. And the most important thing about helium is it is the second most common element in the universe after hydrogen. The big problem with helium is it ain't that common down here.
No.
And it is an absolutely non-renewable element.
Oh.
We can't get any more of it. Right.
So why helium?
Helium.
So why are we wasting our birthday parties with that?
Exactly. Every time
I've just learned something new. This is like my mind has been blown. Why are we wasting our birthday parties on a gas that's non-renewable?
It's a non-renewable gas. Well, here's the thing. Australia is actually a producer of helium. There's not a lot of them in the
Where does it come from?
Helium comes from the...
You were like, I can't wait for you to ask that question.
Oh, you fell into my trap.
Damn it.
Right. Helium is created by the decomposition of radioactive elements like uranium and thorium, stuff like that. It decays in the ground. The helium is released. It worms its way up because it's lighter than air. It worms its way up and generally winds up in natural gas deposits where it can then be separated.
Okay.
Australia has lots of natural gas.
Yes.
We are, in fact, the 4th largest producer.
So Australians can waste their helium on birthday parties.
Now, when I say we're the 4th largest producer of helium in the world, we only produce 3% of it.
Wow.
That's the 4th largest producer. America produces 56%.
Wow.
Yeah, I did sit down and do this. Qatar creates 31%. And the 3rd largest producer is Algeria with 6%.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense that America's full of a lot of hot air.
A lot of hot air. Right. Now, I would have loved Trump to get up and go, everyone believe me, I'm truthful. Anyway, everyone sounds like Michael Jackson when I do it. Now, the whole thing is, this is the really important thing. With helium is the only element on the planet that can escape the Earth's gravity.
Okay.
When it gets released, if you don't capture it, it will just literally float away. Right. Now, there is a massive source of helium very close to us. It's only 8.5 light minutes away. The sun produces a lot of helium with the breakdown of hydrogen. All right, so that one of the results is helium ash, it's called. But, of course, good luck getting it. Everyone's actually hopeful that we can find helium-3 somewhere like on the moon and we can mine it and then break it down into helium.
And when you say everyone, you mean there's one person who's keen on that?
Me.
Yeah.
Me and Elon, 2 people. Elon and I.
Not everyone.
We're going to sit on the moon going... Right. So the Americans worked out if we use helium, we can put balloons up and they won't get shot down. Right. But then they also went, we've got all the helium. They wouldn't let Germany have any, which is why the Hindenburg happened. The Hindenburg was a hydrogen-filled balloon. I mean, I found it interesting. There is footage of the Hindenburg and they've got little cigarette lighters. And I'm like, guys, you're on a freaking ball of hydrogen.
It's so crazy to me.
Right, so that was the big thing. They couldn't they weren't going to be using hydrogen anymore. It's too dangerous. So they went on to helium. And America actually said if the war kept going, they would have basically had rigid dirigibles going over Germany and just bombing it.
Wow.
They would have just flattened the place. Now, the whole thing with going through history, the next step was World War II, barrage balloons. Remember, every time you see like the Battle of Britain type stuff, there's always a balloon on the end of a string. Right. They just float over London. They'd have these big sort of bomb-shaped balloons floating over London. Well, what you do is that basically you put those balloons up to about, 1,500 to 4,500 metres and that would stop low-level bombing. Right, so you wouldn't get an actual bomb. And then they started actually putting explosives in the balloons. So if the planes got too close, they blow them up.
Okay.
Right. Now
So it's like those bombs they used to put out in sea.
They're called mines.
The mines.
Yeah.
But
Air mines.
Yeah, so it was like air mines.
Yeah.
But you know the ones that used to just, they float, I used to find them really, really weird. No,
The ones
like
with
they're
little-
kind of they're kind of scary looking. They'd just be out in sea.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that before.
Kind of like
air.
that. And they could also release, like if there was a squadron of planes coming
They
in,
just
they could
release
release
it.
it and it could float up into the middle and explode.
I mean, who knew balloons were so clever?
They're so dangerous.
I know.
Right, now, we go to the Cold War, and the
Yep.
Americans really got into balloons during this, right, during the Cold War. As they said, as the statement said, balloons were a means of overcoming a lack of photographic and meteorological intelligence on the Soviet bloc landmass.
Yes.
Basically, they went, let's play with balloons. So you had Project Moby Dick in 1953, which led to Project Genetrix in 1956. And basically, they were just floating balloons. They had, of course, like the U-2 or the high-range
Like the band?
spy planes.
Oh.
U-2 was the spy plane.
So Bono wasn't up there.
No, but they named themselves after a spy plane. And there was, of course, the story of Gary Powers, who was flying a U-2
Of course.
spy plane over
Yep.
the Russia and got shot down. The thing with balloons is they were using them in Afghanistan, they were using them in Iraq. And in fact, one of the things they're used for nowadays is landmine clearance.
Right.
Because you literally lie under a balloon and you can float a foot above the ground and work on literally
Very
locate
clever.
the mines and take them out. South Korea have been using them.
Hmm.
They float them over the DMZ into North Korea and release propaganda pamphlets.
Oh my gosh.
So the North Koreans shoot them down, and the North Koreans just floated one back, but it was a little one with just a sensor pod underneath it. It wasn't threatening at all.
Yeah, because this is what was so interesting to me. It's like all these people were like, oh my God, how dare they send a balloon? Like, this is something that has never been done before. And there, I know. And there was like this rhetoric around how it was just China testing out whether we can pick up anything in our airspace.
Well, that's an interesting point that we'll get to. Now,
Okay.
The other thing that everyone's sort of forgotten about is they're not just the three that went across during the Trump administration. There have been June 2020, one went across Japan, 2021, Taiwan, January 22, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India. They're all, and everyone's like going, they've got to be Chinese. No one knows who else would do
So
it.
Chinese just letting balloons off left, right, and centre.
Yeah, February 22, Hawaii had F-22s scrambled because there was a balloon showing up. And funnily enough, they always seem to go over military bases. The weather.
I know.
We want to know what the weather is like over Edwards Air Force Base. And finally, Costa Rica and Colombia, there's one floating around down there now. Now, probably the Americans have had one floating down there because of Colombia,
Yes.
the drug deal. And
Makes sense.
They do use them as surveillance platforms. And now, everyone goes, but what's the point? Why would you do that when you've got a satellite? Well, here's an interesting point. One, satellites are generally stationary, right? They sit in a location. Well, they've got a set orbit. So, one, they're very predictable. So once you know that there's a satellite coming.
You cover all the things that you don't want seen.
Exactly, right? And also to move it out of position is extremely expensive. And also the other thing is it's traveling at 24,000 kilometres an hour above the Earth. You're going to get snap, snap, snap and that's it.
Yeah.
A balloon can literally hang for days over a location.
You're right.
No, it was an interesting point they made is it seemed to be hovering over, I think it was
It was
Montana.
a nuclear site.
A whipple. What's that mean? A missile silo.
A missile
A
silo.
whipple. How did I get whipple?
I don't know. I don't know how you get most of the things that come out of your mouth.
Good point. Right. So it was floating over a missile silo. And interestingly enough, as they said, there could have been like proprietary aircraft technology up
Yep.
there that they didn't want seen. So that would have to be parked in a hangar. If you had flight plans, you couldn't do them. Right. You literally can just really inconvenience everybody underneath. The other thing is because they sit in the stratosphere, so they sit sort of like between 25 to 37 kilometres above the Earth.
Right.
It's very hard to get to them.
Right, because they're a little bit too low for planes.
No, they're too high.
Oh, they're too high.
Right. So between 24 and 37 kilometres is the stratosphere. And that's
Yep.
where, well, it goes higher, but that's about where these surveillance
So they
balloons
sit
hang.
just above the stratosphere.
What, in it?
In it.
In
but
it.
like at the very top end of it.
Well, no. Let's not get into atmosphere.
Because Red Bull did a whole thing where a guy dived off a balloon.
Yep.
And it was like in space.
Yeah. So if we go, you really want to break down the atmosphere.
I don't actually. Stop. Let's stop.
Right, but here's the thing. So between 24 and 37 kilometres above the ground, that's where these balloons generally operate.
Yeah.
A commercial airline, so the planes we would fly, around the world in, 10 to 12 kilometres above the ground. A fighter plane, up to 20 kilometres it can
Okay.
go. Right, so generally they operate outside the area that, say, an F-22, though they believe an F-22 Raptor, of course the Americans haven't said, but they do believe that the Raptors can go a bit higher than 20. Right. This balloon was extremely low. It was only 18 kilometres up. It shouldn't have been that low.
So basically, it's probably sprung a leak and started drifting down.
2 points it could be made. It could have malfunctioned, right?
Yeah.
It could have sprung a leak, or the Chinese could have just like gone,
fuck it.
Screw it. Let's send it in low. Because here's the thing. Everyone goes, well, that's ridiculous. It would just get blown off course. The thing about it is it did have like multiple solar panels and multiple propellers on it. Though again, this is a very big thing.
So I think people, when they think of a balloon, they're thinking of like the regular balloon that you blow up. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't think they're imagining like what the technology around what a balloon could look like for surveillance.
Right. That's really good. So because the balloon itself would like the thing that lifts it, that makes it negatively buoyant, that makes it float, is the helium.
Yep.
But then there's a secondary bladder inside that just sucks air in and out. So if you want to make the balloon heavier, you pull more air in and it drops. You want it to make it lighter, you blow air out and it lifts.
So it's kind of like a drone in that respect.
Exactly. Right. Now, the great thing about it is there's two ways you can operate it. You can operate it from the ground. Right. Now, that's pretty good if you've got the ability to track it and track it closely. You can operate it that way. But what they believe might have been happening with this balloon, which could have been the problem, was it might have been operating with an AI. Now, the AI would literally go, this is the course you have to follow. Now, the atmosphere, the wind doesn't all blow in one direction. Different stratas of air, different directions of wind. And if you go out on a really, really sort of like one of those sort of nights, it's great. As someone said, go out on a boat and you sit there and look up, you'll see clouds going one way, but clouds going a different direction.
Yes.
So basically it's going, I've got to keep going east towards the east coast, which is where it was brought down. And interesting, when you look at the pattern it follows the jet stream around across into the United States. Down through Canada and then out through the Carolinas.
Had it made its way from China? How did it get all that way?
It'd gone out of China, over Japan, up around the Bering Sea, down through Alaska, down through Canada, down through Montana.
That's insane.
Yeah. And it went across, funnily enough, it just seemed to be going across all of these missile silos.
Yeah.
Right? So as it came out, that's when they sent the F-22 up. It fired a sidewinder, another very old piece of technology.
Yeah.
Right? Really old missile.
And I think now they're collecting the debris.
Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing is, like, everyone's going, but it hit the ground and it would have hit the water like hitting concrete and it would have broken into a million pieces.
No, these things are massive.
But there was remember we talked about Operation Ivy Bells, where the Americans, they also, while they were doing Ivy Bells, they picked up, and some of the pieces were only 6 inches long, but they managed to reverse engineer that missile and work out how it worked, right? It was a hypersonic supersonic Russian missile. So the thing is, it hit the water. Yes, of course it's going to fall apart. It's it's a heavy piece of kit hitting the ground or hitting the water, but the water is only like 14 meters deep.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really easy for the Americans to pull everything out. Now the Chinese have gone, weather satellite.
Yeah.
I just, honest to God, as soon as I heard about it, I just imagined Xi Jinping dressed as Pennywise from It going, you want a balloon, Joey?
And it's very interesting because I think the timing of it isn't particularly good for China, considering they were in trade discussions with the US.
Now that's a really good point. Blinken was about to go over.
Yep.
He's cancelled his trip to China.
And this has to be embarrassing for the Chinese in some regards.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people are sort of intimating that, well, maybe China did it at this point in time in this way to go to America going, we're willing to negotiate, but we're not going to muck around. We're still willing to go the whole hog with you. To me, why? What's the point? I mean, there have been multiple instances of balloons going, like the Chinese using balloons over the last few years.
Yeah.
Now, the Americans are doing it too. Let's not be stupid. In fact, most militaries do.
Absolutely.
So basically, we have drones. Now, the longest drone you can have on site, well, I think the longest they can stay up there is maximum 24 hours. These balloons can hang a lot longer. Now, there was a source basically said to me, this is what the Americans are thinking of doing. They're sort of readjusting their air combat potential in the Pacific because of the rising Chinese threat. One of the things they've sort of done is, we can use these surveillance balloons, but they can also work as communications platforms. They can also work as electronic, like LNT source. That was the other thing a lot of people said was this thing was probably not just taking photos, it's floating above all of these facilities and it's soaking up all of the electronic emissions and it's reading them. right?
Yeah.
So the Americans are also using them as communications platforms because you can pop them up in the atmosphere, and as long as the helium doesn't escape.
So what do you think about the idea that it was sent in to kind of test the US and their reaction to such things invading their airspace?
Look, the potential's there for
but
that.
I just think it's too embarrassing for China, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't see the benefit for the Chinese.
Yeah.
Right. It's A, it's embarrassing. B, it's so clown showy. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, one thing it did do was it kind of galvanized the US military to go, hang on, this is technology that we need to really, really focus on. And I also think, I really do believe that there must have been some sort of malfunction in it, simply because it shouldn't have been visible.
Exactly.
It should have been up so high that it just would have looked like most people would have looked up and gone, what's that? But the fact that you could get out there with a nice camera lens and get a decent shot of it, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, and I think what was also interesting to come out of it was also in regards to the timing of it, but how a lot of people were saying, yeah, well, China has had this kind of balloon-shaped thing spying on US teenagers. It's called TikTok.
Yeah, I saw that. I remember that.
And the reason why this is so apt is because, we've got the TikTok CEO who's testifying before Congress in March. So this is essentially will have the US government being a little bit more forceful on those questions because they're like, well, what's China really doing?
Yeah, well, but here's the thing. China is the preeminent power on the planet. Well, not the preeminent, it's the emerging power on the planet.
And it is a risk to national security.
Yeah, of course it is, right? TikTok is the problem with TikTok is it's just a data thing, and
Well, no, but it has the ability to control and sway the narrative, which can be used for propaganda and can be divisive to democracies.
Oh, totally.
So I think from that perspective, when you have the Chinese government in charge of something that millions of teenagers are perusing, it can work in their favor.
Yeah, I mean, to me, basically a lot of TikTok seems to be a lot of close-up magic and people at concerts going, this is awesome. But there are, social media, and we've discussed this before, social media is an influencer. I mean, Facebook was heavily involved in the Arab Spring, right? People were using Facebook and those sort of messenger platforms or social media platforms. Elon Musk is causing all sorts of drama with Twitter. TikTok is owned by a government, right? That's probably the difference. The other ones.
But that's why I think this was such an embarrassment for China, particularly because they've got, as we just mentioned, the conversations going on about foreign trade, and then we've got TikTok before US Congress. So I think this is the last thing that they really wanted to happen. And I also want to make the point, because a lot of the conversation on Twitter was around it. I mean, of course, they politicized it. It was a Democratic Republican debate. The Republicans were like, well, the Democrats aren't working hard enough. And then all of a sudden defense was like, well, when Trump was in, there was all these other balloons, and people were like, no, they're making that up. So, I mean, it is quite possible that the US president isn't briefed across all of this stuff.
You know what? When you've got an asset that large floating over your country, you're going to be briefed.
Really?
God, yeah. Yeah, they're not going to go, geez, we can't tell them that there's a balloon on station. It's like, basically it's coming out on Twitter. Right. So if it's coming out through social media, it's coming out probably on television. Well, not probably.
But why were the other things not disclosed? Is that because the balloons had never come down that close?
What, the Trump balloons?
Yeah, like the previous balloons. Because people are acting like this is the first time it's ever happened, right?
I think, again, it's one of those things where the balloons probably would have been detected, located, and they probably didn't penetrate as far into the continental United States. Yeah. But also, because they were probably up at a much higher altitude, they weren't as visible, therefore people weren't going, hang on, there's a freaking balloon hanging over us, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right, so the military would have, in the interest of national security, gone, we don't need to, they don't need to know. Unfortunately, everyone knew. And then, of course, there were the congressional Republicans who decided we're going to weaponize this to talk about Sleepy Joe again, which is like, sit down, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. The military, when something enters your airspace, one of the things about these balloons as well is really interesting because they move so slowly. Right, they're more drift than high-speed penetration. They don't send off as big a radar signal.
Right.
This is what I'm reading. Don't quote me on this. I could be very wrong. And also because they get further and further up into the atmosphere, your radar range isn't infinite. So there is signal drop. Now, the other interesting thing, and this is a point that everyone needs to remember, is the territorial airspace above a nation extends to the end of the atmosphere. Right, you don't go up to the stratosphere and go, it's not international waters up there. Right? You know how we talked about territorial waters?
Yeah. Well,
right?
no, well, of course, because you have countries that shut down their airspace.
Yeah. You shut down the airspace.
So
and
in war times, people shut down their airspace quite often.
Well, the interesting thing was the number of people that were like taking photos through the crosshairs of their sight on their rifle and people, pointing their,
So American.
Yeah, very American, pointing their rifles up into the sky. Yeah, it's not going to hit, right?
No.
That was the big thing when MH17 went down in Ukraine and the Russians went, it was probably someone with a shoulder. No, sorry. At 10,000 feet, you're not hitting it with a Stinger. You've got to have something that is also able to get 10 kilometres
Also,
above the
the
ground.
flight went through...
over combat airspace.
Yeah, combat airspace, which wasn't great.
What is it? A competitive airspace.
Yes.
So look, big mistake. You don't fly over war zones. But you don't fly over a country's airspace. China has broken the rules by going, let's push one over there. Now, America, as much as you can go, how dare you?
Yeah.
I'm Thaddeus Howe and I am the balloon flyer. Right? America does it too.
Yeah,
and has
of course.
been doing it for a long time.
Over China?
Oh, God, yeah. They'd be sending them into China. Of course they would.
And Russia.
We're not idiots, right? Here's the thing. It's like every time something happens in the intelligence world, I can guarantee you.
Everyone else
is probably doing
Yeah.
it. It's just we haven't been caught.
Yes.
And look, Australia, at the moment, Australia is moving into the drone sort of sphere. We've got one of our own, which is meant to, we've just developed it alongside, I think it's either Boeing or Lockheed. That's been developed out at Woomera. And it's what was it? I think it's called the fruit bat or something. It's a bat. And it's a real, even the Americans have gone, hang on, this is a really good drone.
Amazing.
Right. But we've also been buying.
Does it shit on you really badly like fruit bats do? You can't get that stain out.
It hangs upside down and goes.
You just can't get the stain out.
Because fruit bats, of course, are always on the helium. But the Australians have also, in fact, Abbott announced it when he was Prime Minister. We bought a thing called the Triton, which is, it's not a big, chunky four-wheel drive drone. It's a long-range US drone, and it's a really good one. But again, drones have got limited capacity because they've got a limited airspace. In fact, drones don't generally fly as high as commercial airliners. Right? They sort of fit in the middle. Right, they sit in that middle space, and also they've just limited hang time, where you've got something like a balloon, and I'm pretty sure we've probably floated a few balloons out now and then, right, with a little listening platform or a camera platform or something on it. Again, as everyone said, those propellers wouldn't do anything. The propellers do one really important thing if you're trying to take photographs. It stabilizes the platform. So if it's moving and there's a rocking motion, an AI on board would go, hang on, how do I stabilise this? Or there's just a gimbal with a gyroscope in it that goes, we need to stabilise, and it automatically stabilises the platform. The camera starts rocking off shots. And then as it moves on, the propellers stop and it just keeps drifting. The big thing about the balloons, and again, it comes down to that thing with everyone going, it's so silly. That's the point.
Yeah.
Right? It's high. Most people would look at it and go, this is just so ridiculous.
Sometimes we out-tech ourselves.
Well, the thing is, this is really old tech.
But simple.
Yeah, simple tech. And that's the really big thing about drones, or about balloons, I should say, is they're inexpensive compared to any other surveillance tool.
100%.
Because a balloon, it's not that hard.
And also, no one sees a balloon as a threat, especially when it's got a clown attached.
Exactly. A little clown, a little basket underneath with a guy with a bottle of champagne going, just passing by. I'm Thaddeus Howe. Mr. President, look at me. I'm at 65,000 feet and I can't breathe, but I'm drinking champagne, right? So, bottom line, I think we're at the bottom line now.
We are at the bottom line.
Bottom line, have we talked about this enough?
I think there's not enough balloon content in the world right now.
I don't think so.
Bottom
I think
line.
we need more balloons.
No, bottom line.
Bottom line is this.
Okay.
As much as, and one other thing I forgot to talk about, it comes down to the helium.
Okay.
This is going to work for as long as we have helium. But as soon as you run out of helium...
So I think the one thing that I've taken out of this ep is that we're going to run out of helium.
Helium is a highly...
I had no idea. I feel like that is like a learnt thing for me right now.
Every time you go to a party and there's the happy birthday floaty
Yes.
thing, just think about the number of photos that could have been taken over a missile silo somewhere in the US.
Maybe if I'll just invent my own little drone, fly it over people's houses.
You know that guy in, what was the Pixar movie with the house?
Oh, yeah, Up.
Up, yeah. That guy?
Yeah.
He has no respect for national security, that old man.
No.
Right, so basically, this is going to go for as long as we have helium, right?
Great.
We can't, you can't fake helium. You can't manufacture
fake it till you make it?
Yeah, you got to find it,
Yeah.
right? And, Australia, we sell helium. Are we going to keep it for ourselves? Who knows?
Let's pocket it.
It's pocket, yeah, we pocket it.
Save it for a rainy day.
Yeah, pocket it, and then we all float away.
Yeah.
Where are you going, David? I got pockets full of helium. So, bottom line is, if you see the balloon in the sky, someone's watching you.
Looking for a new career? Welcome to Do HVAC Training Service Center in North Charleston. Enroll today in our comprehensive HVAC training hands-on field experience-based program, covering troubleshooting, maintenance, installation, and more on various HVAC systems and ductwork. We offer EPA and NAEP preparation and testing, along with various certifications. Enjoy payment options. Achieve certification in under 5 months. Enroll now for your new journey of skill development and career advancement. Log on to dewhvactrainingsc.com to inquire.